Well, we continue our analysis of ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa's time at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry today. Well, Ramaphosa has been compelled to answer questions under oath about his oversight role and alleged participation in state capture during his predecessor's tenure. To speak to us about the significance of his appearance today, we're joined by University of Cape Town Public Law Associate Professor Richard Calland. Richard, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. I suppose where the President really began with his address today was acknowledging the fact that him coming before the Commission of Inquiry speaks about our democracy, the kind of accountability that we have within our society. Of course, many people would have moved past that because what we really want are the answers. But how significant is that? And should we really be taking a moment to applaud him?
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on this. It is an important moment when a sitting president comes before a judicial commission of inquiry. It's always a very significant moment. There's the optics side of it, the symbolism side of it, and then, of course, there is the substance and the questions and the probing and the testing of evidence. On the optics, of course, all he had to do was show up today, appear to be constructive, reasonable, decent, the leadership credentials that he has, his brand, if you like, and already he would have a lot of people, I think, on his side. And the juxtaposition with his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, of course, is very stark. Zuma has been running from the Commission. He's been doing pretty much everything in his power to avoid appearing in front of the Commission and answering questions, to the point where he now, as we all know, is on the verge of facing a penal sentence for his contempt of court in failing to do so. Ramaphosa, who is not an accused, who hasn't been subpoenaed, who has volunteered from the word go. 2 years ago, he deposed his affidavit, his first affidavit in relation to this appearance today, has made it clear that he supports the Commission's work. He wants to be helpful. He wants to be constructive. So that symbolism, a bit like Mandela appearing in court and standing all day to give evidence in the SAFU case, the rugby union case back in the 90s, the symbolism of this president accepting the Commission of Inquiry, accepting the rule of law, and standing firm, regardless of the questions he may face and the awkwardness that those questions may create for him, I think is very, very important.
Of course, that's where the true test lied today, Richard, in terms of the kind of questions that the President was asked and how he answered those questions. People still have big issues with how the Cadre deployment policy of the ANC works, because in many respects it has been seen as a contribution to why there's been loss of capacity in senior positions across all spheres of government. And today it very much sounds like the ANC is not going to be making any changes to its approach at all.
So today was the first of probably what will be or turn out to be 4 days for Ramaphosa to appear in front of this commission. Today and tomorrow as ANC president, and it's important to distinguish the two different hats that he wears, the two presidential roles he plays. Today and tomorrow was about being president of the ANC and answering questions as president of the ANC. And then he'll return next month in May to answer questions as president of the executive of the government. So the most important, I think probably the most interesting part of today's evidence, you're absolutely right, was the questions relating to Cadre deployment, because he was chair of the deployment subcommittee of the ANC during a critical phase in the years of the Zuma administration and what we now call state capture. And the questions that were being put to him were around, firstly, what is deployment, what is Cadre deployment, what is its significance, and what does it mean for the appointment of people to government positions. And what Ramaphosa did, and I watched this part of the evidence, I didn't see it all, but I watched this part rather carefully because I thought it was probably going to be the most significant part of his evidence today, given that we know, and evidence has been adduced to the Commission, that a whole string of rather rogue elements, extremely dodgy, nefarious people have been appointed during the Zuma years to key positions in government. And what Ramaphosa basically said was, well, you know, we recommend, and we don't always get our way as the deployment committee. So he tried to sort of dodge it somewhat and skirt around it. Was he asked significant questions? Well, at one point, Deputy Chief Justice Zondo appeared to be becoming rather impatient with the generality of the President's answers. What I would expect is that the Commission would ask more penetrating questions, and that perhaps will happen tomorrow.
What didn't come out of today's hearing, Richard? And perhaps let me rephrase that. Have we learned anything new today from the president of the ANC, from what we heard from Gwede Mantashe a couple of weeks ago, when he was also detailing exactly how the deployment committee, as he puts it, of the ANC operates?
Probably nothing new. And again, to make my point again, this is not just Ramaphosa who is giving evidence and, in a sense, being scrutinized. It is also the Commission, because the Commission, I think, needs to make sure that nobody can easily or credibly say that they are giving Mr. Ramaphosa an easy ride. He isn't, as I said before, an accused person. He hasn't been subpoenaed. But he is a very powerful actor, not just because he's president now, but because he was deputy president of the ANC and deputy president of the country during the period from 2012 and then 2014 as deputy president of the country. Key period of time up until 2017, during this very, very villainous period in South Africa's history, where the democratic state was hollowed out, threatened, undermined, and billions of rand looted. What was he doing? What action did he take in those positions of power to stop that process? That is there's a series of questions associated with that. I think we've only just begun the process of giving Mr. Ramaphosa an opportunity to talk about that. There is a forensic kind of fallout potential for him. There's a risk in this, but I think the upside, which we've already discussed, is that he appears to be a willing witness, somebody who is there constructively helping the Commission do its job.
Do you think that it's because of that fallout that today the president didn't quite answer some of the questions, and in fact he threw the can further down the road and said when he comes back he'll deal with issues such as why the ANC continued to take funding from Bosasa despite the fact that they had so many questions around them, and yet there were never questions around whether or not it was morally correct to still be getting funds to fund some of their activities, election activities.
Because he's not a witness in relation to certain aspects of fact, in a way he can probably avoid dealing with those sorts of questions head on. At least he'll probably try to avoid so. I think he's there to paint a big picture. And he will, and it's a bit of a chess game between him and Deputy Chief Justice Zondo and Counsel for the Inquiry, Advocate Pretorius. The three of them are sort of circling around the issue. And I think Mr. Ramaphosa will try and be as general as possible and as unspecific as possible until such time as he is pushed into giving more direct, more specific answers. And that's where this relationship between a commission of inquiry, which is not a criminal court, where there is not really cross-examination as such, but there is evidence led by the counsel for the inquiry. What that counsel has to do is decide at what point in the evidence he is going to push harder and seek to penetrate what may be a sort of generalized set of answers or evidence by Mr. Ramaphosa.
Of course, one of the things that the Commission is facing is the fact that there will be critics who say, well, when others were before the stand, they didn't get to leave giving evidence without answering very specific and precise questions.
Indeed, and that's where it's important that the Commission is seen to be fair. But then again, the Commission is not in the business of trying to make criminal law kind of charges stick. What its job is to find out what happened and why, and then to assemble for the government of the future a set of recommendations that will prevent something like this happening again. And so what Mr. Ramaphosa's job is to assist the Commission in that task as the head of government and in today and tomorrow as the head of the ANC. So in a sense, his job is remedial. It's not really so much forensic. And the risks for him are not about legal liability, but more about political discomfiture and whether he, as a political leader, will be discomforted by the question and whether it creates an awkwardness that he can't really cope with. But clearly, he came across, and people would no doubt debate this, I think, as a reasoned, reasonable, decent witness. His focus was very much on the future. He kept repeating that I'm forward-looking, I'm really about fixing the problem. I accept that there was a problem, but he didn't really want to, and he's trying to avoid getting into too much detail. He knows there is a mountain of evidence already has been adduced before the Commission on the detail of the corruption that took place. He doesn't need to go there unless he really has to.
Professor Richard Calland, thank you so much for your time tonight on News at Prime. He's with the University of Cape Town.